Do you want to jump? Do you want to? Because that's fine with me. Folks, we're talking Lethal Weapon. Simon Foster, I am so excited to be talking about Lethal Weapon with you, sir.
I can tell there is an absolute cadence to your vocal range right off the bat here that tells me that this is one of the life-defining moments for you, certainly from Best Movie Year 1987, as our podcast is called. The podcast in which we choose to look at 100 movies from 1987 and decide if it is, in fact, the best movie year ever. This time, we're up to, what are we up to? Episode 10 of Best Movie Year 1987, and this is one of the real biggies. We've sort of, I don't want to say filler for the last 9 episodes, but we've got through the dog days of February and January movie releases, and now we hit one of the real big ones, old Lethal Weapon. And, just frankly, I'm not too old for this shit. I love the movie. Do go on.
Yeah, look, this is definitely the first big movie of the year, I would say.
I think so, yeah.
And subsequently,
I absolutely think so.
Yeah, and subsequently the first big movie we do here on the podcast. Look, so let's maybe talk about our relationship with the movie first, and then we're going to play the trailer. But I'm going to say it was 1987. I'm 7 years old, which means obviously didn't see this in a cinema, but caught up with this. I've been trying to work this out because this is one of those films that I know I watched a lot as a kid. Because it was the 80s and parents were negligent and you were able to watch whatever. It doesn't matter.
Very
true. There was a rainbow cartoon on the TV, for Christ's sake. So, look, the 80s were a magical time where you can plonk your 7 to 8 year old on the couch to watch Lethal Weapon as much as they want. I know that I did that because in 1989, I went to the drive-in with my parents, saw Lethal Weapon 2, and I was very well aware of what was happening on the screen and who all the characters were. So I know that if that was the case, I certainly knew this film backwards and forwards by that point. But also, to my mind, as a 7-year-old, and obviously watching this as a taped movie off the TV, I would presume, to me, this was a film that had probably been around for years and years before the sequel came out. So I was surprised to think about it, as I was watching this, going, 1989, that means it was only 2 years later that they made this inevitable sequel because of the chemistry and the success of this first film.
I saw the film at Village Cinema City, and as part of the George Street cinema strip there, a lot of the great cinemas had disappeared by then, the Paramount and the Rapallo and all those ones. But the Village Cinema City with its major big staircase right in the middle there, and its beautiful Cinema City 1, which had the strange sort of roof architecture going on there, the ceiling architecture, which I'll never forget. A lot of the movies we'll be discussing as part of this podcast was seen in that cinema. That's where I saw Lethal Weapon, and countless times on VHS as the years rolled around. I was, at this stage, older than you, let's just say that, and Lethal Weapon was very much a defining moment. Mostly because, and we're this far into the podcast and we haven't mentioned a certain Mel Gibson yet, but it was the blossoming of a major movie star because of this film, and that resonated with me and my love of movies. So, yeah, I did. It was a definite cinema release.
In so many ways, I see you as the Murtagh of my rigs.
Well, yes, I think there is a little bit of that chemistry, a little bit of that energy in what we do. Yeah, you're crazy as shit, that's for sure. And I am getting too old for this shit. So that perfectly sums up what we are. I wish we'd thought through this bit a little bit more, because I would have gotten you to shave your beard and just had the moustache for the podcast. Yeah, and I didn't want to go all the way, but yeah, I would have done that. So let's have a look at the trailer and remember what some of this great action film is all about.
He's a criminal's worst nightmare. A cop who enjoys the danger.
No guns, no jiu-jitsu, just bring him down.
Do you really want to jump? Well, then that's fine with me. Come on.
Wait, what do you mean? Wait a minute. What the...
He was ready to retire. Now, he's going to wish he had.
Gun! Oh!
Raj, meet your new partner.
New partner?
Too old for this. If these guys can just stand each other.
What you got in there?
Boy Smith?
A lot of old-timers carry those.
The bad guys don't stand a chance.
Don't kill anybody.
Don't kill anybody.
I'm too old for this. Are you as good as you say you are?
Nobody can touch me.
Suppose we better register you as a lethal weapon.
You ever met anybody you didn't kill? Well, I haven't killed you yet.
Now, we should point out that it's fairly easy to watch this film. It's certainly available for sale or rental on the Apple channels and through Amazon. In the US, it's on a couple of the free ad-supported platforms like Pluto, I think, but also on sale or rental through Apple or Amazon. Is it on one of the Australian streamers? I'm not sure if it is.
So in Australia, you can find it on Binge.
Oh, there you go.
In the US, almost perpetually since the service launch, you'd be able to find it on HBO Max. Well, what was it, HBO Now and then HBO Max, and now it's just like Max. You could always find it there, but for some reason, right now, that is not the case.
That's not the case, no. I was looking forward as well. We are going to get into somewhat of a discussion about whether or not this is a Christmas film. I know you have very firm thoughts on that. Let me just run through the plot very, very quickly.
Go for it.
Following the death of his wife, Los Angeles police detective Martin Riggs, Mel Gibson, becomes reckless and suicidal. When he is reassigned and partner with Roger Murtagh, Danny Glover, Riggs immediately clashes with the older officer. Together, they uncover a massive drug trafficking ring. As they encounter increasingly dangerous situations and nasty villains, Riggs and Murtagh begin to form a very special bond. Riggs' volatile behaviour might just help them apprehend the criminals if it doesn't kill them both first. Lethal Weapon in cinemas, March 6. It was released March 6, 1987, which we should point out. So, not the prime movie-going slot that would suggest that they were hoping it would be a big hit, but it was a big hit. Let's jump straight to the US box office, taking $65.2 million in March of. It would take by the end of March 1987, which equates to nearly 181 million in US dollars. Okay, this is where I get you to have a bit of a guess. Where was it on the 1987 box office chart according to Box Office Mojo?
Sorry, as in like at the end of the year, or
at the end of the year? Yeah, as we look back now.
Look, that's a great question. I haven't looked, so I really don't know. Wow, because the problem...
Top 10, definitely top 10.
Yeah. The thing is, like, obviously I would expect it to be top 10, but we are talking about 1987 here, which, yes, we've had a bunch of dud films leading up to... Well, not dud films, but, mostly duds, leading up to the release of this film. But then after this, there are so many big movies for the rest of the year, so it's actually a bit hard to pigeonhole where it would be. I'm going to guess it's within the top 5, and I'm going to say number 4.
It came 8th.
Oh, okay.
It was 8th in the top 10 of 1987. So, and I mean, 65 million is nothing to sneeze at. That's a solid result. And 180 million in 2024 dollars suggests it was a major hit. But yes, look, 8th.
Can you fill out the rest of the top 10? What are we looking at here?
I won't, because we've got some of those films coming up. But
no one cares. They can look it up themselves. Come on. Okay, Simon, come on. Let's just do it. You're not the keeper of some really sort of deep knowledge here. People can just look it up themselves. Come on, let's do this. What's the top 10?
All right. Okay. As a 10th episode special event, I'm going to rattle off the top 10 of 1987, counting down. Number 10 was Predator. And I should point out, as I look up and down these, we haven't done any of the top 10 on the podcast yet. So this is all something to look forward to, kids. Number 10, Predator. Number 9, The Witches of Eastwick. Number 8, Lethal Weapon. Number 7, it is Stakeout. Took more money than Lethal Weapon, which is a buddy cop comedy, not much more, but a little more. Then The Secret of My Success, a film which I thought was much, much bigger at the box office and was here in Australia, but this is the US chart, was Three Men and a Baby at number 5. Then a little film that we really created this podcast for called The Untouchables, took 76 million at the US box office. And then the big three for 1987 were Fatal Attraction, Platoon, and... Can you guess what the top film was? By some measure, I must say, which caught me by surprise. It's $20 million bigger than Platoon.
What is? I'm not too sure off the top of my head.
Beverly Hills Cop 2.
Okay, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, so that's your big top 10. Just outside the top 10, Dragnet, La Bamba, Crocodile Dundee was a bit of a holdover, so that's still making money in 1987, and then RoboCop. And then finally, at number 15, a film that we have done on the podcast, Outrageous Fortune. Yeah. So big bucks there.
That's right. So what I find interesting about, if you think about that as a year of cinema, culture doesn't exist in a bubble, so obviously we all get influenced by various things. Obviously, we've seen Beverly Hills Cop, which had a lot of the sort of buddy cop elements that we're seeing through here. And it's not like this is the first buddy cop film of the decade either. Like, there'd been 48 Hours and, a whole bunch of other things.
Yep.
Yeah, so it just kind of feels as though maybe sort of Beverly Hills Cop sort of primed the waters a little bit for a film like this, which has such a strong action comedy mix with a buddy comedy element sort of thrown in. But then also, if you think about Stakeout doing really well later in the year, I can't help but feel that Stakeout's doing so well box office wise because the audience were kind of primed for that, having had such a good time with Lethal Weapon earlier in that year.
Of course, and Stakeout is a terrifically enjoyable film as well. I'm a big fan of that.
Absolutely.
So not a problem with that at all. Now, the notion, and this is something we were going to discuss a little bit as we get into our observations of the film, buddy cop, yes, comedy. Tangentially, I would say. I don't know if this is certainly not the yuck fest, the chuckle couple moments we had in this film that became de rigueur. I think that's the correct phrase. Later in the series, when they started introducing Joe Pesci and Chris Rock, this is a dark and at times disturbing and challenging film that features at its core that, certainly to get things started, the incredible leap off the building by the pretty young lady who's high off a nut. And it is a truly shocking moment at the start of the film when that happens, and still shocked me to this day.
So look, I think there are some very strong comedy elements through it. So I would say that the problem with the franchise as it went on was that if you look at this first film, I reckon it's maybe, 70 to 80% sort of fairly serious police movie. We'll get into the depths of how serious a police movie it is in a short while, but as like a police sort of drama, like there's definitely a lot of dramatic elements carrying through that. And there's some moments which get played very heavily for laughs, okay, but they're all very sort of interpersonal character based jokes, and it's not really like it's set up for the joke. But as the franchise goes on, the second one has certainly some darker elements, and within Lethal Weapon you always notice that at about the 2/3 mark it always just shifts into heavy drama and just sort of carries it through. But as you get along with this franchise, it becomes that there's more sections set up for the joke rather than the actual sort of police element of it. But definitely this first one, it's like 80% serious cop film, 20% sort of laughs, and then that sort of increases by about like 10-15% as each sequel goes on.
Every time. All right, let's run through some of the key players in this film, and there's no more central figure to the Lethal Weapon films than one Mel Gibson. Whatever you think of him in this current day and age, this was he'd had a couple of films to this point. He was sort of being bandied about as the next big thing. His first couple of movies didn't do much business at the US box office. I say US movies, films like Mrs. Soffel with Diane Keaton. He did The River with Sissy Spacek. He'd made some small sort of dramas that was trying to position him as a really intense actor. But then when Lethal Weapon came along, he was able to take that, highly intelligent NIDA graduate sort of perspective on acting and bring it to this really damaged figure in Martin Riggs. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, well, I don't have to go out on a limb here. Franco Zeffirelli, the director who was trying to cast his version of Hamlet, saw the scene with in the trailer with the gun and said, "This is my damaged man. This is my Hamlet," and that's how he got the role in the Hamlet movie a couple of years later. So Mel Gibson's extraordinary in this film. Yeah,
look, I think what makes this work is that you've got two great central leads. I think Mel Gibson is note perfect for this, and Danny Glover playing about 10 years older than he actually was, which is a plot point I want to get to in a little bit. But certainly, I think the two of them hold this film together. But it's got a really strong supporting cast as well.
Oh, yeah.
Like, when there's a reason why when people think about that buddy cop template, like Lethal Weapon is the film that everyone comes to. Like, if you go through other buddy cop films, there were buddy cop films that made more money, but it's Lethal Weapon everyone really thinks through. And it's, I think, the casting right through. And because of that strength of casting and the strength of what's I think, actually very good script for the most part. And we're going to talk about Shane Black and his $1 million Lethal Weapon script in a short while, I'm sure. But just that strength of that, every supporting character is given a moment. And you just think about, immediately you know what Darlene Love looks like as Roger's wife. You can picture the kids. You can picture the police captain. You can picture the police psychiatrist who is always trying to, get Riggs actually sort of seriously looked at.
Mary Ellen Trainor.
Everyone stands out. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're
absolutely right.
And then this film has like that great villain in the form of Gary Busey, who again,
Mr. Joshua.
Yeah.
Oh, he's great in this. And he was coming off the back of, it had been a long time since the Buddy Holly story, and he hadn't done a lot of work, although he was steadily working, a lot of good work. But boy, he was able to find just a couple of beats where he didn't go full Gary Busey. You can see the madness behind his eyes, but it's rarely, sort of played out on screen, and that's him doing some of his best work. Plus, you had all these great actors like Tom Atkins and Mitchell Ryan, who, because of this film, ended up playing characters like this for the next 2 decades. So, this is a great, great cast.
Okay, look, we've talked about Gary Busey a bit. Let's get into the age of it all.
Yes,
okay,
all right.
So look, first, as you said, Gary Busey doesn't really go full Busey in this. I like that he's fairly restrained for the most part. Like, that's kind of what the strength of Mr. Joshua is. But it's interesting watching that. And again, just going back to what I was saying earlier about being a kid and not really appreciating that Lethal Weapon was... just contextualizing it, just 2 years shy of Lethal Weapon 2, but also just 4 years shy of Gary Busey playing a much older role in Point Break as the older grizzled cop in a Murtagh kind of a positioning in that sort of buddy cop dramedy, if we want to phrase it that way.
He'd established a character for himself at this point and lent into it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, Gary Busey's only a couple of years younger than Danny Glover. So it's just kind of, I don't know, you watch that and he makes that massive leap age-wise within just a couple of years on cinema. But let's get to the Danny Glover of it all. He's only 41 in the film as they're making it. But he's playing 50. Like, the big plot point of this is that he's too old for this shit. But, he's still young and vital by, like,
he's
today's
right in
standards,
his prime. Exactly right. I did not look that good when I turned 50. I guarantee you won't look that good when you turn 50. And it's a terrific performance that he plays, and physically he's able to embody exactly what these wild and crazy stunts that would knock any man about do to a 50-year-old. So it is a great performance by Danny Glover. And you're right, there is no Riggs without Murtagh, and that comes through. Yeah, it's funny saying this.
Sorry, I was going to say, there's a really great line pretty early in where he's just had his birthday bath where all the family come in, which is a bit weird.
I have issues with that, yeah.
We'll put that to the side. But there's the thing where he shaves his beard off and he's just got the moustache, and the police captain's seen him, and like they've had a few conversations, but at the end of the scene it like ends with this tag of saying, yeah, and you looked younger with the beard. And I just thought that was kind of hilarious because he shaved the beard to try to knock a few years off. And
then Agent Johnson from the Die Hard films, who's working with him in the office, says, oh, you shaved your beard off. I liked you better with the beard. It was great. Look, and you're right, you mentioned Shane Black. We do have to mention very quickly the talent behind the camera. First of all, producer Joel Silver. He'd had some success, but this made his name in Hollywood. Also, his reputation as one of the toughest producers out there. You did not want to get on the wrong side of Joel Silver. He was a force to be reckoned with. Still is. I think he's still around. Writer Shane Black was having a huge year. He went from this into Predator, so he became the go-to guy for tough, masculine, intense sort of action buddy films.
Okay,
and
sorry, can we just hold on Shane Black for a moment?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Talk about him. Okay, so Shane Black, he ends up really sort of changing Hollywood quite dramatically with this movie. So one of the reasons we're doing this podcast is because by looking back at the films from the 80s or maybe even going into the 90s, we're able to talk about films where the idea of the spec script is something which was like just common, I guess, within Hollywood. Like these days, it's very IP driven. Lots of films are developed and gone through, countless things, but the decisions to go with a certain film or story really comes from that sort of IP holding position. So you know what it is. But back then, it was the idea of people would pitch a story from the ground up. People were writing spec scripts, and Shane Black sells his spec script for Lethal Weapon for $1 million. It's the most money that had ever been spent up to that time on a screenplay. And what that did was it changed the narrative around screenwriters. So screenwriters then saw, hey, look, you can get $1 million payday by producing a script, and so suddenly you just had a whole bunch of people emulating Shane Black and trying to get that $1 million payday with their screenplays, and that really fundamentally changed Hollywood for at least like the next 10 to 15 years.
There'd be no Joe Esterhaus without Shane Black's early days. Joe Esterhaus, of course, famously did Basic Instinct and made the sexy erotic thrillers of the early 90s a multi-million-dollar screenwriting enterprise. So you're absolutely right. This was a game-changing, industry-changing film for not only Shane Black, but everyone involved. And, of course, the great director Richard Donner. Now, I don't know how much has to be put at the foot of Donna or director of photography Stephen Goldblatt, but this was a Donna that we hadn't really seen before. Now, you Richard Donner from, of course, Superman, you being the Soups guy on this podcast.
Yep.
Richard Donner had been working for a long time, and he'd done The Omen. He'd done films, major Hollywood works right through the early 80s. He had directed up to this point The Goonies as well, so he was a go-to guy for commercial projects, but none of them had the energy, the intense look. And when I say that, and I was going to get to this a little bit later, but it's a great LA movie as well. It makes LA look so beautiful and just really dark and nasty in this film. But that's Stephen Goldblatt. The editor does a great job. Donna oversees some amazing talents in creating this film. It doesn't look like a Richard Donner film. He seemed energized by the script and the casting as well. So I think it's a standout in his career.
Yeah, look, so when you look through some of the earlier, credits in his career, so before he does his first feature film being The Omen, he's got a lot of procedural cop dramas through the 70s. So things like Streets of San Francisco, Cannon, sorry, I'm just trying to find a few. I did a few Kojaks, so he definitely had sort of the cop genre down. So I think that when it came to Lethal Weapon, like it was a space that he was certainly familiar with. So I don't think he was coming at this from a, outsider perspective at all. He was well and truly ensconced in it.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Let's get into a few observations about this. Now, I'm going to lean into this whole is it or not a Christmas movie by opening with the opening shot of this film is literally Santa Cam. The Jingle Bell Rock song is playing, and the camera is gliding over the cityscape of Los Angeles just as Santa would in his sleigh, and that sets the tone by saying this is definitely a Christmas film. Your thoughts? You start off with your thoughts. I'm going to go and finish reading a couple of books, and then I'll come back when you're finished.
Sorry, is this thoughts of just being a Christmas movie?
Yes, I know. Okay. Yes, exactly. I know you've got some detailed perspective on this.
Oh, no. I mean, I don't think it's really all that complicated. I just think that, look, there's been this narrative for years about how Die Hard's a Christmas movie, and you look at Die Hard and it kind of isn't. Like, it's certainly set at Christmas time, and there's like an element of family that kind of comes into play with the film, but broadly, most of his family's kind of ignored through it. It's really just him trying to get to his, his ex-wife.
Okay, I disagree with that, but
the kids aren't really an active player in it. Like
no,
they become a focal point. Like the news crew go out to record them, but I don't think that really, like the kids aren't active participants in the film.
My point with Die Hard is that the story pivots and is thrust into motion because it's Christmas. It has to take place at Christmas time. There is no office party. There is no John McClane visiting LA. There is everything is put into motion because of Christmas. All the other elements, the family and the ho-ho, and a lot of the killings take on a Christmas element. The ho-ho-ho, I've got a machine gun.
Yeah, but I think those are plot elements. They're not thematic. And that's what makes a Christmas movie a Christmas movie. It's about the themes.
I disagree. We need to do a special Die Hard episode. I don't think that's true.
We really don't. But where I think that Lethal Weapon is more of a Christmas movie is one, you've got a lot of the visual elements that are related to the storytelling, which do relate to Christmas, which, as you said, opens like the sleigh ride, which I think is pretty fundamental to it. You've obviously got a lot of the iconography running through, but like that's no different to Die Hard. But where it becomes a bit more a film about Christmas, and this is, again, it's culture being impacted by other culture. When we think about Christmas movies, we're looking for stories that are about family and redemption. And this movie is about a guy who has been lost. He doesn't have a family. He finds family through Murtagh and his family. He ends up finding forgiveness for himself, because he's feeling guilt around the death of his wife. And he finds a light out. And these are themes that you find in Christmas movies that stretch all the way back to things like It's a Wonderful Life being the most iconic. But it's just regular themes that you find in Christmas movies are repeated through Lethal Weapon in a way that certainly aren't through Die Hard and certainly aren't through some of the more modern contemporary ideas of, can you believe this is a Christmas movie? No, that just set at Christmas.
Okay, yeah, fair point. Also themes that, as you described them there, are in that great Thanksgiving movie, Planes, Trains and Automobiles. But I don't disagree with you. You're absolutely right. Those elements are central to the plot. I have mentioned how quickly the film pivots into a really, really dark scene when she does the leap off the building. It does remain one of the most shocking openings. And straight away, we are into the weight of what's at stake in this film. Even when it's two cops goofing off or it's the action or something, there is a weightiness to the plot of this and the death of the girl and its impact upon the father, which is echoed in Murtagh's relationship with Tracy Wolfe as Rianne, his oldest daughter. The bathtub burst-in scene. It's very close to seeing, Danny Diddle. Because it's strange, who would burst in on their father having a bath? That's very odd. And surely there's a better time to bring I wouldn't bring a birthday cake into a bathroom.
No, I mean, a birthday cake's probably the thing I've got the biggest problem with.
Right, yes. And
just generally,
going around in circles. Tracy Wolfe is Rianne. I do just want to mention, she has a very weird, sexy teen vibe. But, as I mentioned, it does link the dead girl of Murtagh's old friend Hunsaker with his life as well. He understands why the man is suffering the way he's suffering because of the death, and that Rianne is kind of on the verge of that sort of sexy young woman life that where the other girl went down a very bad path. So I see the links now, having watched it again.
Yeah, Murtagh definitely sees a lot of his own family as he's going further into the police case. I just want to swing back slightly, and this is a scene that takes place after the bathtub scene, which is that obviously you got the very memorable moment where she jumps off and lands on the car, but then you got the next morning where Murtagh turns up to the scene of the crime and finds the body, talking to the police, and the police had already identified the sex worker who was out on the street, and it's a
Dixie.
fairly moment. Yeah, Dixie, I'm not going to repeat that language on the podcast. The kids later on mentioned Dixie quite a fair bit. But like Dixie's just a bit of a, throwaway sort of joke of a character in the way that she's mocked by the Murtagh character.
Oh, we got a hooker.
No, it's Dixie. Would you please tell these bozos to lay off, please?
Hey, you bozos lay off.
Had a jumper here last night. Dixie was walking by, saw the whole thing.
You got a statement from us? Send her home.
Oh, thanks. I'm Pete, you know how it is.
Yeah, sure. All dressed up and no one to blow.
You're hilarious. I can't believe it. character.
And she's like, that's hilarious, man. And you just kind of think that's it. But then later, as the plot sort of develops, you find out that Trixie played a much more intricate role within the film. It's Trixie's house that they go to, which gets blown up, very memorable.
The big blowing up scene, that's a huge scene.
Yeah, and you find out that Trixie possibly had been at the apartment the night before, sleeping with Amanda Hunsaker, and so it was her that gave her the drugs that sort of led her to jump on the balcony and jump off.
Yep.
But it's just like this really small part, and you do treat it like a bit of a joke scene. But then, as the plot comes through, it's so memorable, I think, that you're actually able to take your brain back and connect that character and fill out the background of that character in a way that isn't really evident here. And, you know, I don't know how much time and effort really went into like creating that as a character, but it works for the movie in a way that I've never really noticed until I watched it this time through.
That's exactly the observation I was going to make, that I remember the exploding house scene vividly, but I don't remember plot-wise how they got there. And it was only the sort of the Dixie character a long time prior that linked it. And that's confident screenwriting to say, hey, I'm going to go back 45 minutes to a throwaway scene with the Dixie the prostitute, throwaway character, and make it central to the plot. They make the joke in the film that it's thin. It's a thin sort of premise to go on, and we're going to investigate it, but we're not really that into it, and still makes it work within the film, which is pretty bold.
I mean, this is kind of the thing with the movie, which is that if you think about this as them doing police work, so much of, and particularly sort of early in the film where they're going in, speaking to witnesses and people related, so much of it just seems to be Murtagh saying, oh, look, here's this person that we're going to go see. There's no actual police work that he's done that's led to that. So the idea is that there's a whole bunch of police working on this case that isn't Murtagh and Riggs, which just seems fanciful.
You're speaking very much to a point that I had at the end of my list, but I'll bring it up here, is that by the 2/3 mark of this film, it's complete lawlessness. There's absolutely no police procedure at all. By the time they go to the desert, and by the time the daughter's been kidnapped, any sort of notion that this is proper police work is completely out the window, and that these are two cops doing their job. No, they're not. They're taking giant rifles to sand dunes and bumping off people like snipers. This is not what police do at all. So,
well, no, but also what's happened, and this is why it's so important to have that daughter character being brought into it, in order for them to get to that point of lawlessness, like stop being the professional, it's become the personal. So the daughter's been kidnapped, and so Riggs said, like, there's a moment, I can't remember what the actual language is, but Riggs says, hey, look, if we're going to do this, it's going to get bloody. And so it's very much him saying, are you prepared to take to this next step? At that point, to me, it becomes less a cop film and more like a contemporary Western.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It's great observation. Mel's early scenes. He wakes up in the caravan. If you didn't know anything about this film, if you literally just sat in on a test screening and said, okay, here's a new movie, in those early scenes, you would kind of think that maybe Mel is the damaged bad guy in this. It's not until he gets to the police station that you realize he's a cop. He's, the full ashtray, the booze, the living in a caravan. He could be the bad guy, but it turns out he's definitely not. And that sort of gives an insight to the character he is.
That maybe gives an insight into your privilege as a white person, Simon, sort of in the way you view the police. Like some people may say he is the bad guy.
Yeah. Oh, beautifully put. Yes, I'll take that. I'll take that as a shot. That's fine. That was a body blow. Well done. You know what? I had a very interesting experience watching this because I watched this on DVD. I went to my DVD shelf, took out the DVD, still in plastic. I hadn't ever watched it on DVD. Unwrapped the plastic. It had director's cut written on the top, and I didn't know what that means. Now, I don't know which version of this you watched, but there are two scenes in the film that I watched that I'd never seen before. One of them comes right at the start of the film when Riggs is called to a sniper incident at a school. There's a scene of kids cowering down behind a concrete wall, and there's a mad sniper up on the roof, and the police are all hiding, don't know how to deal with him. And Riggs just walks into the play yard, and as soon as the sniper shows his head above the window that he's shooting from, Riggs just unloads on him. It hints at why he's a little crazy, what he's willing to do, how outside of procedure he exists. I can see why they cut it for the original theatrical cut, because it does what the jumper scene does, and we're going to talk about the jumper scene soon. in terms of his willingness to be a little bit crazy, a little bit mad. It does what that does, but not as well. So they didn't need to have both scenes in. The other scene is a very short scene with a prostitute where he sort of pulls up on the side of the road and says, "Hey, do you want to come back to my caravan and watch some Three Stooges movie with me?" And he goes, and she says, "Really? That's all I have to do?" And he goes, "Yeah, it's Three Stooges night." And that scene's in there. But yeah, the big sniper scene was in the director's cut that I'd never seen before.
So I've seen the director's cut a few times. Can you just refresh my memory? Where does the sniper scene take place? Is it before or after his introduction in the Christmas tree?
It's well before the Christmas tree scene. Yeah, no, it's the very first sort of action. It's the very first scene in which Riggs pulls his gun and does the shooting. So it's right at the very start.
Yeah, so I think the Christmas tree cocaine sale scene is a much stronger intro for Riggs, and that's probably why it was cut. But if you think about that thing that we were talking about right at the beginning, is this a comedy? I think that when he starts the film with that sniper scene, it actually sets it up as a much darker police drama than it plays out. Yep. So I'm sure they removed that, one, to give Riggs a stronger intro at the Christmas tree sale, but then also just purely to make it a little bit more sort of, they get to the laughter of it just a bit quicker.
And the Christmas tree scene is exactly what I've got written down next, because the Christmas tree scene and the woo, 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 and the whole thing where he does the whole Three Stooges thing. The very next scene, which is sort of the Christmas tree scene, is the light kind of crazy side of funny side of his mental instability. It is the very next scene that's the gun in the mouth scene, where he goes back to his trailer and plays with the bullet in the gun and really suffers through it. And I was watching that and the tears are running down Mel's face and I'm thinking, man, this is amazing. But within the space of a few minutes, we see the light and the dark of his madness. And that was great screenwriting and great storytelling.
Yeah, and that's the thing with this movie. They talk about this being that $1 million script. Shane Black, as a script writer, when you're reading it, the actual screenplay itself is often just as entertaining as the product. So there's lots of when there's establishing scenes sort of being written, that's written just as much for the audience, just as much the audience of the people buying the scripts as it is the actual stuff that's being translated. But the film itself, every scene is intricate. You can't really take a scene out without interrupting the rest of the movie.
That's
it all
exactly
speaks
right.
to itself. And you just watch this, and it's just scene after scene. It's memorable scenes. You can look at any movie and say there were 3 memorable scenes. Scene after scene. If we were going to do a what was your favorite scene from this, it's actually hard to choose because there's just so many moments.
The one part of the film that shows what a great bit of screenwriting it is the car park scene where they first come out of the car park. It's a long shot. Where they first come out of the police station, I should say, and it's a long shot of them walking from the doorway down the car park, just talking and getting in the car for their first trip on the road. And in that passage of them just walking, there's more character reveal and there's more chemistry built. Movies nowadays, they would take 20 minutes to build that kind of rapport up. In that one scene alone, it's superb character writing, and I can see why it was a $1 million script.
Yeah.
We should go to the jumper. Let's talk about the jumper, the famous broken handcuff scene. When Mel goes to the building to save the yuppie from leaping to his death, somehow they have a time to blow up a bag that nobody notices down below. But he does you want to jump? That's fine with me. Let's do it together. You started the podcast with a terrific impersonation of it.
So terrific.
Thoughts on the handcuff scene?
Look, I think that when you think about Lethal Weapon, that's definitely one of the 2 or 3 scenes that you think about immediately as being part of the film. It's become iconic. It's been parodied in other movies. I'm sure that one of the scenes in National Lampoon's Loaded Weapon 1 is probably parodying that scene. It's been a while since I've seen that, but I'm sure that there's a parody for that. But I guess one of the things that we do ask in this show is what is the memorable scene for you? And when I was watching it through, the scene that struck me this time, and maybe this is just me getting older, more mature, is that it wasn't the big crazy scenes like that. It wasn't them going to the guy's house, and I'm not even sure exactly what his role was specifically, but he falls into the pool and the plastic covering over it. Like, that's kind of semi-iconic, but you know, it kind of felt like a bit of a throwaway scene this time through when I watched it. But the scene that really like hit me was when Murtagh's taking Riggs back to the family home. The strength for me is very much that relationships that is built between Murtagh and Riggs. It's the interplay between the two of them, but it's a genuine friendship that's being formed. And it's on that night the two of them actually have a friendship that goes beyond just being the professional and becomes the personal. It's Riggs going into that family. It's about him connecting to the wife. The kids are very excited to see the new partner who isn't sort of an older person. I think it's the first sort of contemporary partner that Murtagh's possibly brought home. So that
Brienne makes goo-goo eyes at him.
Makes goo-goo eyes, but then they go and sit on the boat, and you learn so much. Scene. Yeah, but you learn so much about both the characters through the things that they are saying and things that they aren't saying. So from Murtagh going into the house, he starts acting like a bit of a, as his wife calls him, she's like, "You're being an asshole," and it's because he's showboating for Riggs, like trying to show, "Hey, I'm the family man, like here's all the great stuff that goes on, and you know, the fun jokes that I have with my wife about her terrible cooking." Like, that plays out. But then you just sort of find them on the boat. You find out Roger's sort of renovating this boat and has no idea what he's doing. Like, it's just kind of like these nice little throwaway sort of elements of character that's sort of taking place within this. But to me, that actually becomes the foundation of the movie, that scene. And that really just jumped out at me as being just incredibly clever.
Yeah, I agree with you. I also point to the gun range scene where it's very funny. And as the bullets and the guns are being fired and the bullets are whirring around you, they start to ponder on the plot. Now, let's talk about AKA the plot. In the first hour, there are only 3 scenes of any note that speak to the wider plot. Her jump at the start of the film, meeting Mr. Joshua in the nightclub, and when they go to the bank and deal with the father, the father of the murdered girl, or the girl who jumped.
Before then, when they're going to the swimming pool where the guy gets shot, like that's them investigating. Like, he's a guy that is running the prostitution ring, I think, is. Yeah, but they don't really quite clearly explain what he is. It's a bit of a throwaway comment. No. And again, that's what I was talking about earlier, which was all this police work that's happening outside of the two of them. It's kind of someone said, "Hey, Roger, go and see this guy," and so they've gone there.
Yeah, exactly right. So it's just what Black and Donna do is that they give the characters in the movie room to breathe, and the gun range scene speaks to that exactly. There's humor. There's character work as the plot sort of takes on a bit of an element, it takes on a bit of a momentum. And I think that's to the benefit of the whole film, that by the time the running and shooting and screaming starts, we're already invested in these characters as more than just a couple of cops doing their job. They're real people in a very movie way, but still very real people.
So when I saw this movie during the week, it was an interesting day for me in that it was kind of like a fake Christmas day for my family. We did Christmas quite a few days early, and so we had the entire family around. And then, as is tradition with all Christmas family gatherings, you sit around and watch Lethal Weapon afterwards.
And do a bit of a rap.
Yeah, quite a fair bit of that.
Yeah.
But I was talking to my sister about it straight afterwards, and she said, "You know, I've seen this film a bunch of times, but I didn't realize that it was so heavily sort of rooted in Vietnam." And that's kind of the other thing that I think is super interesting about this movie, which is you look at a lot of the movies of the 80s and TV shows of the 80s, and you'll find they just have Vietnam as a fundamental bit of DNA that runs through the entire thing. Like, even things that, you know, as you think back about, you start watching, like Magnum PI, like the entire thing with Magnum is that all the guys that he's hanging around with in that show are all like former Vietnam vets. And you come to this movie, and Vietnam is very much part of the DNA of this. It's not just that Roger's connecting with someone being Hunsaker, Michael Hunsaker, the guy that he was in Nam with, but also just the Riggs character. You think about how he's this damaged individual. The reason why he's so damaged is because as a 19-year-old, he's working as a sharpshooter in Vietnam and getting involved in, what was the name of the group? It was the Phoenix something or other.
Yeah,
it's some sort of special forces
team. Yeah.
And so that's kind of interesting. Obviously, Hunsaker starts talking about Air America and Shadow Company and all this sort of other business that's going off the side. But the plot only exists because of the lawlessness that was taking place during that Vietnam War, which resulted in the psychotic breakdown of people like Riggs. And so through the 80s, he's dealing with that trauma in a way which is obviously unhealthy.
Great observation. It also points to the fact that this is an LA that's run by old white guys who have come out of Vietnam. The bad guys in this are all just your white collar types who were running this heroin ring. Mitchell Ryan is the bad guy, and Tom Atkins, of course, we've mentioned, and of course, Mr. Joshua is the whitest that Gary Busey has ever looked. So, this is not a film that sort of speaks to. Well, it does speak to race in that Murtagh's character is an elderly African-American man and how they connect with each other, but it never comes up in their relationship or in the family scene. So it's...
I was thinking about that because one of the things I think about on an almost daily basis is what would I do with a modern Lethal Weapon? And the TV series does not nail that at all. Some people may forget there was a TV series based on Lethal Weapon and, barely. But one of the things I keep thinking about is that if you made this movie today, there's no way that the fact that the film series would be about a black and white cop, black and white cops, plural, like working together, like essentially identity politics would play into this in a really big way. Because if I was to reboot Lethal Weapon, I would play around with the age of them quite a bit more. Like the way I would make it my own would be to have Murtagh as being a young black man who's being partnered with an older, less stable white guy named Riggs. And so you play around with the age that way because obviously we've gone through a bit of a cultural reckoning where younger people are questioning the behavior of older folks. And so that's what you could play around with a Lethal Weapon reboot in a really nice, elegant way. But most people sort of playing around with this would definitely play with the race side of things, which I think is just maybe slightly more interesting. And it's just noteworthy watching this that race at no point ever really plays a role here. Like, they never talk about Murtagh being an African-American cop. He just kind of is. And that never becomes a plot point where, obviously Murtagh's daughter's got, the goo-goo eyes for Riggs. Like, the racial differences are never even a consideration, which is to the strength of the film, I think, because not everything necessarily needs to be about identity politics. But certainly if they did that today, it would become a very core part of that relationship.
The torture scene is very tough. It features the great Al Leong, one of the great action faces of the 80s, as the man doing the torturing.
Sorry, speaking of identity politics, as soon as they need to do Chinese water torture, suddenly the one Asian person comes into frame.
Yes, there are two moments in this that they wouldn't get away with nowadays. After the house explodes and Murtagh is crawling all over Riggs to put out his jacket on fire, Riggs says, "Are you turning..." They use the F word, "You turn faggy on me," and then in the torture scene he calls him Mr. Chin. So
you know what? Sorry,
two unpleasant moments that wouldn't cut it, but otherwise, not so much.
The other thing that I noticed was that when I think it's in that shooting range scene, as they're trying to work through the thinness of their theory that the prostitute had been like in the bed with her, Riggs ends up using a phrase like "as disgusting as it is," which I just thought was fairly shocking.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. All right. So, finally, I want to end on a couple of things. He uses the great line, "Get the flock," as one shepherd said to the other, "Let's get the flock out of here." I still use that today. That's one of my go-to lines. And the film is dedicated to Dar Robinson, who had a very short career as Hollywood's greatest stuntman. And he only did a couple of movies after this one, before he was killed very sadly at a very young age in a motorcycle accident. But Dar Robinson's one of the great stuntmen and did a lot of the great stunt work in this. So Vale Dar Robinson.
Hey, I've got two questions for you. Can you explain either of these? Okay. Right at the end of the movie.
Sure.
Okay. Can you explain how at any point Murtagh would allow a cop car to be driven through the front window of his house? Like, at what point is that ever going to be permissible? That is the one point where I watched the film going, I don't buy this at all. And then the other thing is, I do not understand the fight at the end. I mean, my God, it's entertaining, but I do not understand how that comes to be.
No, they and all the police turn up finally on the scene in an otherwise police-free Los Angeles. There's that amazing chase where Riggs is running down the road with the giant gun and bare feet, and there's just no police around anywhere. Bullets are flying all over the place. But at the end, when all the police cars turn up and they need their flashing red and blue lights to make for a really effective piece of cinema, they all just stand around and watch another cop almost get killed by this albino. So it's a whole thing. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with that end scene, but it was pretty cool to watch, I must say.
Yeah. Baffling. Also, I mean, if you think about this in like a modern context, there's no way that everyone isn't out on the street sort of recording these police beating the crap out of each other like with their camera phones.
All right. The question that I need answered every week, is there a pink sweater in this? Yes, there's two. Darlene Love is wearing one in the kitchen, and Roger himself, in the very last scene of the film, is wearing a lovely knitted pink vest. So yes, there are pink sweaters in Lethal Weapon. We've established the box office. Did we establish a most memorable scene? I'm going to go early on this one and say, for me, the action went to another level in the scene, the eggnog death scene, when the man is shot through the eggnog, and then the helicopter goes swirling down into the ocean and Riggs is firing after it. That is the perfect mix of editing and music and action. That was when the movie I'm all in on this film.
Well, I already mentioned mine, which was the dinner when he brings him
exactly
home.
right. Very true. Most valuable player? We just agree it's Mel.
Yes.
Mel plus Danny.
I honestly can't separate Mel from Danny Glover in this one. Like, I just think it is such a perfect two-hander. Mel only works because Danny Glover's got such a grounded, mature performance running through this.
My final thoughts on this are that I've always loved the film, and I've always watched it as cracking.
Wait, I don't think I've actually given my most valuable player. My MVP for the movie is the young kid playing Alfred, who I think is hilarious.
Playing Alfred? Who's Alfred?
Alfred is the little boy who's witnessed the explosion at Dixie's house.
And the Outgang scene.
Yeah, he's the one that separated from the other kids because he's the one that saw the... what we discover is Mr. Joshua, who's gone to the house to, blow it up. And he delivers what I think is my favorite line in this film, which is, what does he refer to him? He was painted. Which allows Danny Glover to give the very funny, like a tattoo? Like Popeye?
Yeah. Because all the kids love Popeye in the hood. Popeye in the hood. It's true. That's a great... Yes, I did have a note about the Owl Gang scene where they all sort of take on this character. So, well spotted.
Sorry, the other thing is I feel that you're about to wrap things up because I can't believe we've made it through almost 50 minutes in this podcast.
I love it.
We haven't talked about the greatest aspect of this movie, which is the theme song.
Oh,
song. This is the song that plays over the credits at the very end. Which the song's called... I don't know if you've done your research on this.
I have not.
The song is called Lethal Weapon by a band called Honeymoon Suite. And... when you watch it, and look, I'm not going to ruin it for anyone, but, certainly do yourselves a favor, get out the Spotify and take a listen to this. I was reminded of, there's a great Netflix series called Love, and one of the ongoing jokes in that series is that the main character and his friends love to sit around his apartment and create theme songs for movies that didn't have theme songs. And they're always really on the nose that incorporate the name of the film into the songs.
Yep.
And when you listen to Lethal Weapon by Honeymoon Suite, it is absolutely a song that was crafted by the guy from Love and his friends. It's fantastic. Listen to it. It's great.
This is the second week in a row. We had Dokken singing Dream Warriors in last week's podcast from the Nightmare on Elm Street 3, and now we have Honeymoon Suite with Lethal Weapon. It is a terrible song, and I can't believe, and we're going a little bit off track here, but key to the soundtrack of this film is one Eric Clapton, and the film is full of amazing guitar licks that go, which was sort of speak directly to the action movies of my youth and how they given so much more weight by talent like that being involved. And then they get Honeymoon Suite to do the end credit. Where was Eric? Eric had clocked off by then, I guess. I don't know.
It's a bit weird, but I will say, the lyrics are dumb for Lethal Weapon by Honeymoon Suite, but the music's actually pretty memorable. So,
all right. You know your music.
Yeah.
All right.
But sorry, one other thing I just wanted to drop in.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, so in terms of another most valuable player in this one, the MVP I'm going to also mention is the Murtagh house. Okay, and the Murtagh house is particularly notable because it's all on the back lot of Warner Brothers.
Ah.
So, for just a little bit of history, there was a street which, look, if you're watching, and I'm just trying to work out if much of this will land in the podcast we're doing, but... the street that they filmed it on was called Blondie Street, And in this, because if you ever go to, okay, so it's a bit hard to really understand if you haven't been to one of these backlots before, but, and this is a thing where they've gotten rid of a lot of the backlots. So Blondie Street actually got pulled down about 4 years ago. Nowadays it's just apartments and office space there, which is, so the Murtagh house is no more.
Shit.
Yeah, it really
Assholes.
sucks. And listen when I get through the rest of my little spiel here and you'll hear what I'm talking about. But if you go to these backlots, you'll often find there's like full streets where you walk around and you can see house after house, which have been used in all these Warner Brothers movies and TV shows over the years. Yep. So Blondie Street existed on the, what do they refer to it? It was the Columbia Ranch. Okay. And this was out the back of Warner Brothers. On the street that the Murtagh house lives on, or lived on, is also the house from Bewitched, the house from Gidget, the house from the Partridge Family, Eight is Enough. Across the road from the Murtagh house is the house that Billy and his family lived in Gremlins, another classic Christmas movie.
Oh. Wow.
Yeah. Obviously, you got the Murtagh house. Right next door to the Murtagh house is the National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation house. Pleasantville was also filmed on that street. Small Soldiers, another Joe Dante film. He directed Gremlins. The film clip, the very memorable film clip for The Offspring's Pretty Fly for a White Guy, that's on that street.
Oh, wow.
The American Beauty House is on that street. Young Sheldon filmed on that street.
God, all this history is gone.
Yep, The Middle filmed on that street. And if people saw WandaVision, that was one of the last productions to use that street. So WandaVision, the main house in that was, I think... across the road. I think it might have been the same house as the house from Gremlins, because they get reused a lot. Oh, and also, you can go in... There's this great video, and we're going to post it as part of the bestmovieyear.com website, so go and check that out. We'll put it up there. There's a YouTube video of a guy going around visiting all these houses just a couple of days before it all got pulled down. And he goes into one of them, and I can't remember which house it is, but like you go in there, because all these houses are functional houses. So like they were all filmed in there. So there's iconic scenes where, and I was never a big Friends viewer. Sorry, the Friends water fountain was on this street. And actually moved that water fountain elsewhere around the Warner Brothers lot. So that lives on, just not where it originally was. But there's like one of the houses he goes into, and if you remember in Friends, and it must be the first or second season, because that's all I've really seen of that show, there's like a VHS tape where they filmed like their high school prom, and you see like them coming down like the stairs in the Geller family home, and like that's inside one of these houses, which may well have been the house from National Lampoon's, I think.
Wow. I will be looking forward to that. And I'll put it as part of the newsletter so people can see all this. So well spotted. Yeah, the backlots are beautiful. I walked the Paramount backlot once with some Variety magazine people, and it's such a magical experience to do, and it's sad they've all gone.
Well, they're not all gone, though. So I did mention that this area on the Warner lot had been pulled down. This is about a mile out from the actual main sort of studio lot. There's still quite a few streets around where you can walk around and see a lot of iconic movie houses. If you're in Los Angeles, go and do the Warner Brothers studio tour. Like, it's actually really, really incredible how much history you'll see that you've lived through movies and TV shows over the years. Like, I've walked down a street, and I've walked out from the house from the Gilmore Girls that got used for, I don't know, one of the other, like, the WB kids dramas, but across the road from that is the house from Gremlins that the older lady's living in and gets sort of, shuttled out the front window. That's also the house from Growing Pains. Next door to that is the backyard set from the Drew Carey show. Like, there's just so much as you walk down that street.
We come to the end of the Mel Gibson, Danny Glover, Lethal Weapon podcast. My final thoughts on it, much of what this podcast has done to date is me watching movies that I was quite fond of back in 1987, but now in 2024 I realise they're okay. With Lethal Weapon, a film that I'd seen many, many times over, I actually went the other way. This was a better movie than I remember, and maybe I'm a more mature movie watcher now, and all my years as a film critic are weighing on me, but I can realise exactly how good an example of the American action movie genre Lethal Weapon is, and why it holds such a special place in everyone's heart. So, as part of our argument, is 1987 the best movie year ever? This one is so far at the very top of the list as to why that would be so.
Yeah, look, agree. So I had kind of clued in a couple of years ago. This was actually like really quite good. But like sitting down watching it again, like, you know, every time I come to it, I sort of see a bit more maturity in the film than I really appreciated existed in it previously. The only thing that really sort of really stuck out at me this time that I was kind of not on board for was just sort of some of the grossness around queer criticism from Riggs.
Sure. We resume our normal schedule next week. We shuffled this one around to fit in time to take on the Christmas element of it. Merry Christmas, everyone who've got this far in the podcast. Thank you for listening to Best Movie Year. We for the first time in 1997, tap into the John Hughes oeuvre next week when we look at some kind of wonderful, not directed by Mr. Hughes, of course famous for The Breakfast Club and Ferris Bueller's Day Off, directed by one Howard Deutsch, or Mr. What's his beautiful wife's name? She was the actress from Back to the Future, Leah Thompson.
Liz Thompson, okay.
And who features in, of course, Some Kind of Wonderful. So, yes, join us next week for our teen movie edition of Best Movie in 1987. Thank you, Dan Barrett. That was exactly what I hoped it would be. I know you were very excited about talking all things Lethal Weapon, and we got through it all pretty well, I think.
Yeah, look, I think so as well. Just giving people a rundown for the next 5 weeks on the podcast. We're going to talk about Some Kind of Wonderful, Angel Hearts, which I haven't seen. I'm a bit excited about that. Raising Arizona, Tin Men, and Evil Dead 2. So we've got 5 good weeks ahead of us. And then after that, like, there's banger after banger. There's a lot of great stuff to come.
We're into the good stuff, my friend. We got through the first 9, a lot of shit, and now we're into the good stuff. Which is you know, the movies weren't great, but let's say that the podcasting really was. So if you haven't listened to the first 9 episodes, please go back and have a listen to what we have to say about Sylvester Stallone in Over the Top or The Kindred. I look forward to talking to you next week. Bye, everyone.
Thanks for listening.